Good morning, or good evening for a lot of you. I know it's late where you are. Thanks for joining our webinar series here. This is the second go round of this, getting started with Dolby Atmos music. Today we'll be covering setting up your music studio, and hopefully you have a lot of questions that I have the answers for right here, and if not, then we'll engage with them later on. Just a rundown of where we are in the setup here. So today's sessions on setting up your music studio, and then following in subsequent weeks with headphones and specifications, and then how you actually get out to the world. So this is a very fluid market right now, and something that you should watch closely because there's an awful lot coming up. Today, we're going to spend an awful lot of time talking about basic signal flow, though. So music studios, very straightforward, patch bays, etc. What is Atmos when it adds into that? So we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on this. So the basic signal flow for an Atmos system looks a bit like this. So the center of any of the systems, whether they're production suite or mastering suite, is the renderer. So the Dolby Atmos renderer is the brains and the heart of this setup that we've got going on here. And that deals with all of the audio coming in, transforming that into what it needs to be for your particular room. Then we have a source DAW, so Pro Tools, Nuendo, Logic, etc. And that is fed out of the machine via MADI or Dante, or DAB, which is our Dolby Audio Bridge. So in the sense of the production suite, Dolby Audio Bridge is where you're going to be looking for that. It connects to a B-chain processor. Those of you in film and TV will be more familiar with the B-chain processor, but essentially this can be thought of like a addition to add a monitor control to connect to your amplification. And then there's some optional pieces as well that personally I recommend. There are a lot of nice workflows with it, which would be passing through a stem recorder and then into the renderer, but absolutely not essential. And then all of this is interconnected using a network switch. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So Dolby Atmos renderer, at heart and soul of the Dolby Atmos system, looks a bit like this. So comes in two flavors. We have the Dolby Atmos production suite and the Dolby Atmos mastering suite. So let's take a quick look at what those differences are. So production suite is lightweight solution. The mastering suite actually runs on hardware. External hardware to your system. So whether that's a Dell unit or a Mac Mini or Mac Pro for that matter, it's an external unit. Production suite can run on a Mac laptop and use this Dolby Audio Bridge to send audio around the system. The mastering suite requires external hardware, so high channel counts, MADI, Dante, etc. Production suite was really optimized for writing, producing audio. We're seeing an awful lot of work done this way at the moment, of course, with the inability to get into the major studios, but it's fully functional for headphone operation. So you can create everything that you need, right down to the final deliverables, using the production suite and headphones. So that's available for $299 on the Avid store. 3-month trial available. Those of you that have not used that previously. And the mastering suite is available from our dealer network. So the common factor here was metadata. So the extension to the audio system is what to do with that audio. So those of you who joined last week, you know, the audio object is an audio channel plus metadata control data for that channel. So that needs a network switch. So passes via the TCP IP network. We don't recommend using wireless. There's a lot of interference, and basically, if you're looking to set this up, I would recommend taking a look at the Audinate website, audinate.com. They have a great deal of information about network switches that are and network features in switches that are compatible and not compatible. And basically, the rules are going to be the same. So energy efficiency features should probably be turned off. Just you don't want to go into sleep in the middle of your session. And then the digital audio workstations. So Steinberg were actually the first to integrate Dolby Atmos workflows into their DAW natively. They did that with their multi-panner, so the VST multi-panner, some 5 years ago now, I believe. Then Avid followed suit with the integration into Pro Tools 12.8. So now any of the Ultimate editions have Dolby Atmos built in. So 2020.3 is, I believe, the latest version, and that has Dolby Atmos built in natively. Blackmagic, with their acquisition of Fairlight, have Dolby Atmos panning now available in the DAW, and more recently, Apple and Ableton were enabled with the Dolby Atmos Music Panner. So the Dolby Atmos Music Panner, free panner, available from our website, and has a bunch of functionality to enable Logic and Ableton to communicate. So we've taken a look at the renderer and the DAW, and obviously the networks there as well. So we're going to need a way to interconnect. So you see there 128 channels of MADI or Dante is what's probably going to be needed, or that Dolby Audio Bridge. I'm going to focus for a little while on the hardware components of that. So high channel count IOs. We've seen an awful lot of engagement with the market to have these high channel counts in various form factors. So from Yamaha with their wide range of devices for connecting in through their Nuage system and consoles. Avid with the MADI HD, and then more recently adding the MTRX from DAD. RME, they actually powered the original Dolby RMUs, so the rendering mastering units for cinema were powered by RME MADI, Hammerfall MADI cards, and they obviously have Dante as well. Focusrite, as you see in the slide, have a wide range of devices and form factors. So whether you're adding some channels to your workflow or needing to build from scratch, you've probably got a box that will do most everything you need. And then more recently, Apogee converted or added the ability to use Dante into their Symphony IO. So see a lot of Dante. So Audinate have a listing on their website of a wide range of devices and partners. So if you need something for interconnecting with the Dolby Atmos system, it's a fair bet they've got something that you need. So I would recommend going to audinate.com and taking a look at partner support there. So once again, back to this basic signal flow. So from the renderer, we've got 128 channels feeding into the renderer from your source DAW. So that is feeding into the renderer. Getting out of the renderer, you're going to need to be able to pass speaker output, headphone output, and various other things into this B-chain processor. So the B-chain processor will then have a monitor control associated with it, and the functionality that is needed there is basic speaker processing. So room correction. We try and do as much as we can with physical adaptation, but at a certain point you can need some electrical adaptation as well. So a wide range of support in the industry as well. So from BSS, QSC with their QSYS system, DAD with the SPQ card in the Matrix and the AX32, and more music-focused companies like Grace Design. So there's a powerful ecosystem out there to fit most needs. So once you've got your speaker outputs into your B chain, you're going to need a monitor controller. You're probably dealing with more speakers in that environment than you have previously. So again, there are a wide range of support on the market from, again, a lot of similar folks. So DAD, Grace Designs, JBL with their Intonato, one of the early adopters of Atmos workflows, and TAC Systems. So TAC have an extremely adaptable box that does everything that you need. It might, in fact, cook your breakfast for you as well. But those monitor controllers are controlling speakers. So wide range of support in the industry as well. So when Atmos started in the cinema back in 2012, JBL and Maya were used in a wide range of movie theaters, and they also had the support for the coverage, the frequency response, and in a variety of different form factors. Over the last 8 years, we've seen that development occur on the part of a lot of speaker manufacturers as well. So PMC, as you see there at Capital Studio, PMC are a great partner, and we've done a lot of studios with them for music over the last 2 years. ATC you saw in the Blackbird photos, and various others around the world as well. So great partner support from the speaker manufacturers. So I'm going to pause here and give you a chance to take a screenshot of this or whatever you need. But this is a checklist for when you go to speak to your Dolby Atmos dealer. So the Mastering Suite dealers are available via that QR code. If you're unfamiliar with the QR code, just scan point your mobile phone camera at it, and it will take you right to the information you're looking for. Excuse me one moment. All right. So this is by no means meant to be you have to do these things, but you may want to think about these things before you start having the conversation with your dealer or your integrator. So very useful information. So how to place your speakers. It's great that they all exist, but what are you going to do with them? So about 18 months ago now, Dolby released the home studio certification guidelines. So the home entertainment certification. This dictates, a lot of the angles that are going to be needed and things like that. Do recommend you looking for that information from your dealer as well. But we start with that for a music certification need. So, sorry, we don't have a music certification. I personally have been very adamant about that because music rooms are very, very different. So they don't necessarily have projectors and a number of faders that are connected to the system. The mix positions are an awful lot further forward in mix rooms for music than they are in post. So the 50 to 60%, 40 to 60% there is much more akin to what we see in music. I really like the wide speakers. So these two speakers here, they're addressable only via objects, and the reason I like them mostly is that it gets people thinking about Atmos more as a sound field, not a speaker layout. So you'll hear an awful lot of talk about a 514 setup and a 714 setup and a 916. It really doesn't matter, and it's dependent more on the cubic volume of your room and the coverage needed for that, not the channel count that you have. So the flexibility is there in the renderer to take any Atmos mix and be able to translate it into any room because it knows where the speakers are going to be in that secondary layout. The Music Studio onboarding form there is designed to help us help you. So if you don't have a dealer, if you don't have a room designer, we'll happily get you started on that. And if you're in an existing room that is Atmos capable, then please feel free to send along your information. We do pass the information of rooms that we know and trust onto labels and third parties for when they're looking for mixes. So it's a useful list to be on. I like hiding speakers behind fabric as well. If you can't see the speaker, you don't worry about the speaker so much. So you start creating a sound field more than a speaker layout. The general rules of these speakers and what we find works. Even in small rooms, we're actually looking for the 20 dB of headroom at mix position above 85 dB. So while I really don't recommend mixing at that level all day, I do want the system to be able to achieve that. The worst thing would be to walk into a mix room with an artist for the first time and hit play and you get distortion. That would be terrible. So enabling that 85 dBc at mix position is something you should look for. Frequency response. So Atmos is a full range system. So on plus or minus 3 dB between 60 and 16K. All of the speakers that you saw listed, or speaker manufacturers listed on that previous slide, have systems that are capable of doing this. The one big difference between what we've been seeing in home entertainment rooms and now in music rooms is this bass management. So because there's no screen in the music that takes a lot of the energy and then can pass some of that into the LFE cabinets, mixers are using the full setup to place music around them. So bass management amps, bass management cabinet should be added into any music room that you're considering. And it just helps support the overall structure. And you definitely should have us come and tune your music room, and we should talk about that. So the reason behind us tuning rooms is translation. So it would be terrible for us to have these beautiful rooms around the world that exist that then can't send content anywhere. So we've done awful lot of work over the last best part of a decade, and investigating what's needed to make that happen, and applying that now to music rooms. So music rooms, we are tuning to a target curve, which starts at a modified X and backs out from there. So in a more near field room, you're probably not going to have it actually hitting that X curve. You'll have more high end rolled back in, and this is as a result of, as it says there, extensive comparison and testing. So listening to content in studios and then listening in consumer speakers, matching the frequency response that we see in true consumer environments, and enabling that to be mirrored in the studio environment. So the renderer can also export an MP4, which is then compatible with the hundreds of millions of devices that are enabled for Dolby Atmos playback in the marketplace today. So that MP4 export looks like this. So it supports two modes: film mode and music mode. If you followed the series previously, you'll recall the loudness measurement. Music uses integrated loudness measurements, so takes the full track length and monitors the loudness of that, and then sets a dial norm level. The dial norm level is nothing to do with dialogue. It's what the specification is calling for, and is used for this loudness adjustment between tracks and an episodic TV and all kinds of things. So even though the value is set as dial norm, it really has nothing to do with the dialogue content or even the vocal content of your music. So as I say, you can load that onto an X-formatted USB, plug it straight into your Atmos-enabled television or soundbar or Bluetooth system, Blu-ray system attached to an AVR, and it will play back and give you this representation of what you were hearing in the studio in the home environment. So that's a lot of the sort of back-end theory and what we've been putting together. How does that actually look in terms of a signal flow versus the example block diagrams? So awful lot more going on this than on the previous setup for the block diagram, but let's take a step through it. So here we have the source machine. So that's the source DAW, and sending out via the HDX cards that are mounted in a solid chassis using DigiLink. Those connections are going into an Avid matrix. So each DigiLink cable can send 32 channels of audio bidirectionally, goes into the Avid matrix. In this instance, it then actually sends that back out to a record machine. So that workflow that I described of the stem recorder, this is what's being represented here. The audio then comes back into the matrix before routing out via Dante. So this is a Dante card capable of 128 channels of bidirectional audio into a network switch. It's then sending that to the Focusrite PCIe card for the renderer. That is sitting in another Sonnet chassis, and the renderer is running on a Mac Mini. It's sending back out of that 128 channels into the Dante card, and then passing on to the SPQ card, so the speaker calibration card in the Avid matrix. And then the matrix is then sending that out into these DA cards, so 24 channels of DA to get out into the speakers for the room. Another setup, again with a source and record machine, but you have Pro Tools source feeding out of the HD32s. So again, DigiLink out of Pro Tools into the Dante network, powered by the Focusrite HD32s. Passing audio through the network switch into the record machine and into the Atmos renderer. Coming back out using something like the Red 16 line device, you get out to your analog speakers. Again, that's a 914 room with 2 channels for bass management. So all of the surround speakers would be bass management left, bass management right, and feeding into these 2 channels. You can couple that with a monitor controller. So if you want a knob on your desk, you can do that with the Grace Design or the JBL Intonato. But yeah, functionally that's all there. So once again, just jump back to this basic signal flow diagram to recap where we've been and make sure that we're fresh in our heads. So that renderer running on a Dell or a Mac, feeding or receiving audio from a source workstation via a high density channel count IO, MADI, Dante, DAB, into your speaker outputs with a monitor controller and some amplification. Talk briefly about the stem recorder. So passing through the stem recorder, which is acting basically to flatten out any plugins that you might have on the source machine, record down audio straight into a stem machine. It will also record using Pro Tools the pan data as well, so it flattens it out to automation. And then feeds into the renderer. So again, that's the route that I prefer to take with most installs. So the not so basic signal flow is when you add secondary systems. So you might have another DAW, and that might not be Pro Tools or Nuendo or anything like that. It might be Logic Pro sending panning data via the music panner from Logic. And so this is a setup that you might see in a studio that's needing to receive work in from producers or artists. So maybe Capitol or Abbey Road or Blackbird, we've talked about previously, would have audio coming in from a different source, music panner metadata. You can capture that all in the stem recorder in Pro Tools. So all of the audio gets captured. These blue lines here are representing both audio and network data. Slightly inaccurate, but you know. before then feeding into the renderer. So very flexible and powerful workflow that we will be seeing much more of in the coming months and years. So I hope that's covered a bunch of information. Since the last go around of this, our team has put together a getting started at home quick start guide. So seeing the need for a lot of information about these workflows and how they needed to apply in this worldwide pandemic time, the team jumped to it and created these documentations and video series. So go ahead and scan that QR code and it will take you to a box folder that looks like this. So PDF will outline a bunch of information about getting started, the interconnect pieces that you need, the overview video, will talk about the renderer a little bit, and then how to get started in Logic, in Ableton, and Pro Tools, and Nuendo, frankly using nothing more than a laptop and some headphones. So this is produced by Todd Mackinnon and his team. Todd is the product manager for the music products, and covers everything that you need to kind of get started. So very useful source. I'll put that link back up in a little bit. So QC. So we talked about the MP4 export. What's that going to do? Well, it's going to create an MP4 file that can then be played on soundbars, Blu-ray players, etc. The ones that we've listed on the left-hand side here are configurations that I personally have known, I trust to do what they need, and we've had good experience in the marketplace with them. So from Sennheiser with their Ambio soundbar, beautiful sounding bar, but you know, on the high end side, high price side. Samsung Q90R, and then Blu-ray players will do full Atmos bitstream pass through to the AVRs. But there are hundreds of millions of Atmos enabled devices worldwide, including mobile phones, tablets, and various other things as well, and smart speakers. So I want to flag this to you right now. This last weekend, Pearl Jam released on Apple TV a visual album. So their visual album Gigaton is streaming using Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos technologies, and is available for free until April 30th, so tomorrow, in geos worldwide. I don't have a list readily available to me right here, right now, to play that for you, or to give you the list, but it's available worldwide. The album is also streaming on Amazon Music HD Unlimited, so you could ask your Echo Studio to play the Gigaton album from Pearl Jam and get that alt rock sound that we all love. So let's take a moment here to hear from the producer on that album, Josh Evans, about the experience that he had. So. Cool. So yeah, hopefully you get a chance to experience that. It's a great album, and one that I've enjoyed listening to an awful lot. So you can ask your Echo Studio to play it, and it will play in Dolby Atmos as well. More supporting content. So Hear from the Masters. This is a video series that has been running for the last couple of weeks. Greg Penny, who started Dolby Atmos music mixing with Rocket Man, coming up on five years ago now, and telling some of the stories that he has and the techniques that he's learned to use. Last week, Steve Jenowick from Capital Studios, sorry, his episode went live. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube series to be notified of upcoming releases. But from folks like George Massenberg and Chris Baseford, Dave Hampton, Bruce Botnick, Al Schmidt, Nico Bolas. There's a great range of folks that are going to be presenting their knowledge, their experiences of working in Dolby Atmos, and hopefully that's a useful learning experience for everybody. It certainly has been for me. So cool. Well, I hope that answered a bunch of your questions. But now's the time to task Kerry. So let's see what we've got going on here. Okay. Hello to some of you who are saying hello on chat. Thank you. Is there a difference in quality when the mastered out is taken from the renderer and the render and the RMU? I think you're asking about the encoded quality. So once it comes out of the renderer, it goes into a format called ADM, so audio definition model B-Wave, and then that will be put into the encoder. The encoded assets, so the MP4 and the AC4 IMS for headphones are perceptually transparent. They are lossy codecs, just cards on the table, but they have been tested with mix engineers and with key listeners to make sure that they are representing the experience that you have in the studio to the best possible capabilities. So yes, there is a difference in quality, but it should be largely transparent. Just downloaded the trial. I don't have a Pro Tools Ultimate Edition at home, only basic Pro Tools. I tried using the DAB virtual outputs to the renderer successfully. Is there a way to automate movement and panning using the non-ultimate version? Yes. So Pro Tools non-ultimate, or just Pro Tools, is only capable of stereo output, and so the limitations there, are that you can't get to a multi-channel bed, for example. So that 712 bed input, you'd be limited to left, right, or stereo pairs of that getting into the system. So the Dolby Atmos Music Panner, though, will allow you to get out of anything above channel 11. So channel 11 through 128 of the Dolby Audio Bridge is by default an object. So if you put a Dolby Atmos Music Panner, which you can download for free, onto those channels, then you should be able to take whatever stereo audio or mono audio information that you have on those channels and pan them and automate them in the Atmos domain without needing to have the multi-channel capability added for communication with Pro Tools, Ultimate, and things like that. Very similar to the way that to Logic and Ableton operate, because they predominantly, well, Ableton is exclusively stereo, but Logic, for the most part, is also not a multi-channel, and certainly not 712 capable output device. So very similar in that world. Recording and presentation will be shared afterwards, so yes. Prashant, I will send you those via email. Please explain dial norm. So dial norm at its basic level is an automatic volume knob. So it's taking the data about the overall program knowledge, overall program loudness, and giving the decoder a chance to set its 0 point for all the post-processing that happens after that. So it's in between each of the tracks, you get this metadata sent that says, hey, by the way, the next track is -19 LKFS versus -18 LKFS, and it allows you to balance those tracks automatically. So much more information about it in the specifications version. Is the previously mentioned speaker layout placement can be used for cinema premixes? Can be used for cinema premixes, absolutely. So the metadata that exists for the home workflows is exactly the same metadata that exists in the cinema. So you can take that and transition it into a theatrical renderer capable room, and that should work for you. So yes, it was one of the functionalities that is that the production suite was designed for. So yes. Can we go to the useful links without the QR code scanning? Yeah, so the QR codes are there because you can't click on a link in the video feed. So I'll make available after the fact a PDF of the presentation. Those links will be clickable in that. So yes, I'll make that available. Within the high channel count interfaces, you haven't mentioned merging Horus. Also in the speed calibration, you didn't mention Trinov. Does Dolby not approve of the above? So Horus, yes, absolutely. It's frankly not one that comes to my mind an awful lot when thinking about these studios right now, but incredibly functional, fantastic unit, and one that I should add to the slide. So yes, thanks Adita for that. The Trinov, again, the room correction in Trinov and the calibration is phenomenal. The reason we don't tend to add it into the studios is more from a, our engineers then like to tweak. So the way that the Trinov does its thing is fantastic, but then if you're trying to make micro adjustments, you need to hit submit and wait for the entire system to sort of refresh to see if that's made the change that you were expecting. So after the initial setup phase, it slows down the process there. If you're not wanting to have Dolby to work on it in that way with you, then the Trinov will do just fine. And you know, the altitude box is a fantastic box. So. Sorry, okay, I've just seen your question, and I'm not going to address it here, but know that I'm not either, and so there are ways in without it, so don't worry about that. Do you have any suggestions for some immediate acoustic treatments in rooms short of getting a professional tune given the current circumstances? Yeah, I mean, so the truth is that most music studios are treated, you know, very well, and for the at-home measurements, you know, we're not doing anything that's new. You know, we're controlling reflections, we're absorbing low ends, you know, those sort of things. So within the home community, yes, you can absolutely, you know, use some of the techniques that have been widely documented over the years to provide those in home and in temporary studios. So create some diffusion and things like that. And it's going to control the sound field. The professional team will benefit, but is not essential in that sense. So yeah, you use best judgment. Using wide channels in the studio makes the configuration to 16 channels or more. So the wide channels basically create at first level, they start and add it to make it 9 point something. So 9.1.4610. So it's really dependent on the cubic volume of your room and where that might need to go. So yes, I tried to stay away from talking about channel counts specifically because it makes people focus again on the speakers. But yeah, the sound field is what's important, and getting the coverage between the left and the right speaker and then the surround speakers fills in that gap. And so I really do like having the wide speakers for music rooms. So the recordings and presentations will be shared. Well, the recording will be shared automatically with you. I think GoToWebinar sends it 2 or 3 days after, so you'll be able to get this session via that. And I'll send out the presentation later as well. Is there a difference between the mastering suite and the production suite? Yes, so the mastering suite had, aside from supporting what we refer to as sidecar workflows, so a remote system, it also has the speaker calibration functionality that's in there as well, and so you can do a lot more with it. In terms of recording master files and the mixes and all of those sort of things, the functionality is actually the same. So don't worry too much about mastering suite versus production suite for that. And they're interchangeable. So if you're working in production suite at home, and you want to go into a studio, you just reroute your metadata to the remote renderer in that system, and then you should be good to go. Do you suggest a separate LFE subwoofer for a Dolby Atmos music setup separately from bass management subwoofer? Yes. So we do see music mixers using the LFE an awful lot. In fact, in some circumstances, the only reason that a mixer might use the bed is to use that LFE channel. So we do see a lot of use for it, and it's then more often than not, it's adding the extra bass management subwoofer, and we do that because with the way that music mixers have tended to be created, we've experienced things where in-speaker interference is occurring that is creating an undesirable effect in the LFE cabinet. So separating that out and having the dedicated units allows us to better control the sound field. So yes, I do recommend a separate LFE sub and bass management for music rooms. What is the average mix level for the room for Atmos mixing studio? So as I mentioned, the calibration is 85 dB. The mix level I recommend being much lower. So I've seen mixers working at 68 SPL for the majority of their work, and then turning it up to check. That's a pretty extreme example, but it's happened. So generally speaking, 75 to 78 is where people are setting their mix level, and then turning that up to impress clients and things. Why is there a different setup specifically for music? So there isn't. So all of this is based off of the knowledge that we've acquired and developed from the years working through different formats. So the underlying technology is the same for the cinema. So the metadata communications, the audio communications. The difference there is that they're trying to recreate a movie theater environment. So the speakers are set up in a different way. They're often higher and then focused across a wider area. The metadata is the same. So then going into the home environment, the home studio certification was designed to get this translation to consumer devices, to OTT streaming. And so you still had a screen. You were focusing a lot of the mix energy into those front channels still. So when it then came to music and we didn't have a screen, we were mixing for a speaker or a sound field or even headphones. That idea of immersion shifted again, and so the needs of the system became much more much higher. So they were using more full frequency audio in the surround speakers and things like that. So the need to reproduce that effectively caused us to need to start adding more bass management and things like that to ensure that the translation from your studio to Abbey Road, Blackbird, etc., was as close as it could possibly be. So the setup is the same. We just have added more functionality to the system that has been demanded by the music industry. So. Is there a minimum room dimension requirement for Dolby Atmos music mix? So there's not there's not really a minimum. Generally speaking, I like to keep the speakers as far away from people as possible. So our project studio in Burbank is a very small project studio. It's something around 7.5 feet tall, and is not that wide and also not that deep. It's quite oppressive to be in all day long. So having a little bit extra space and the speaker's not quite so close to you will be less tiring and things like that. So I believe the minimum height, and I think you're probably a metric worker, so minimum height to the speaker grill should be 2.4 meters, and there are some minimums for the sidewalls and rear as well. So a lot of that documentation can be found in our music studio certification. Sorry, our home studio certification. Sorry, I got music on the brain. Documentation and available via the resellers. So contact me afterwards if you have further questions, or via the music studio onboarding form. I'll be happy to help you there. Awesome. How do we go ahead with arrays in surround speakers in the studios? So the array functionality is there to enable you to have multiple speakers combining for the bed channels. So the renderer basically allows you to set up a number of speakers. So if you define that you've got 32 speakers in a room, you can have some of those set up as array speakers, and so it's all just in that functionality. And then it just becomes a case of, well, objects can go into each individual speaker, the beds go into the array of speakers, and everything else downstream is largely the same, but you're tuning on a multiple channel basis and all of those sort of things. So, there we go. Awesome. Well, I'm out of questions, and so I'm going to give you all a minute back and thank you for your time. Cheers. Have a great day.